Could you imagine if one day your whole city just evacuated and you had no idea why? This is what happened to the city of Pripyat, which is the site of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. This is one of the biggest nuclear power plant disasters in history, and still to this day, there are still high levels of radiation in some areas of Chernobyl. Today I will be talking about how the mistakes that were made by running the plant, the effect that it had on the wildlife around there, and the effect that the people suffered from the explosion and whatnot. But I would like to tell you about the disaster itself before I tell you any of that. So the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster was caused when the fourth reactor had a sudden power surge that caused a sudden surge of heat that was mixed with water and steam that caused the top of the reactor to explode. After the explosion, the 1,600 tubes containing fuel were also exploded. This resulted in the core of the reactor being exposed to the environment, which also caused a fire, which burned for 10 days, releasing large amounts of radiation into the environment. Now that you know a little bit about the disaster, let me tell you about the effects that, or the mistakes that were made from running the plant. So the operators at the power plant ran the plant with slowly and poorly and with bad communication and coordination with the rest of the members. The day of the event, there was supposed to be a safety test run, and apparently it was so routine that the director of the power plant didn't even show up, which was mandatory for all power plant directors. Also, around the time of the explosion, after the explosion, there were night crew members on duty, and they apparently didn't know, weren't really given proper instruction on how to run the test or do in case of emergency. And so the power plant, not only was the way the power plant was run, but the way that the reactor itself was dangerous because they used graphite instead of water to slow down the power. And the reason graphite was so dangerous is because sometimes the graphite would speed up the process instead of slow down the process. And this is a picture, the far left picture is a picture of the plant before the explosion, and this is a picture after it. And then this is just a part that was in the middle of the, where everyone lived and whatnot. This right here on the far left was the number 4 reactor, that explosion, and then here's a picture of the explosion itself. After the explosion, the Chernobyl reactor continued to produce major quantities of radioactive substance into the environment, contaminating the farm life and the agricultural products in parts of Ukraine and Russia. And over 200,000 kilometers of Europe was contaminated. And that was only the beginning because mostly the forest animals and the berries and the mushrooms that were grown in the area were contaminated with cesium-137. And according to a report done by the UN Chernobyl Expert Group, the levels of radiation in agricultural and the farm life will go down, but the levels of radiation in the forest will continue to be high for decades to come. And this is a picture of how the high radiation levels and the low radiation levels around Chernobyl. When the disaster started, they evacuated 115,000 people from Chernobyl, and later they established 220,000 people. The people who were evacuated only took a little bit of stuff because they didn't know how long they would be gone. They didn't know why they were leaving. They ended up leaving and never coming back, which was sad because most everyone had to start from the beginning. They didn't have anything. And then that was just the beginning, because a lot of people also suffered from radiation poisoning, and some people suffered from thyroid cancer and leukemia. And then a bunch of people also had mental health issues and were, according to the World Health Organization, most people felt like they were helpless and not in control of the future because of the explosion. Thus, they resulted into tobacco and alcohol, and also eating contaminated mushrooms and berries of the contaminated zone. The guy on the far left is the director himself, and this is an article posted of the trial that they ran, and it was published in the New York Times. This is some of the effects on the wildlife, like two-headed moose and radiation zone, and this is overrun by the forest. These were the effects of some of the kids, and this is a hospital and classroom that was just abandoned. And then this is just the explosion in some other places that were abandoned in another mutated animal. And in conclusion, this disaster was terrible and had many consequences, such as the environment was flooded with radiation, the people had to leave and suffered many consequences, and the worst part is it all could have been stopped if they ran it with proper regulations and the right way. Thank you.